Evening, everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution class. You can be seated. Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification Training course here. I'll be your host for the evening, and we're going to be continuing in the responsibility unit, unit number 5 here in our intermediate series. And hopefully everybody's had the opportunity by now to download the books. All 5 of those books are on our Peaceful Solution. Pretty much, they're pinned pretty close to the top when you go to the official Peaceful Solution page there, and you can click on that little box. It's kind of depending on what you're looking at. If it's in your, like a laptop or web browser or a desktop, I guess I should say, or your app or online, you can see it pretty close there at the top, and you can download any of those PDFs from the first 4, including this last 5th one, a unit, so that you can follow along, make copies, make yourself a kind of a velo bind or spiral bound book that you can have for yourself. And that's a great way to get the material and follow along if you're with others in a group. We have some people that set these things up, these classes up as groups, and they'll gather several, 5 or 6 people, 10 people around, and they'll watch these classes and they'll go through and make notes as they go along. So lots of great information, lots of great things to go back and rehearse as you follow along, because this information, again, it doesn't get old, it's timeless. And we're going to continue this this lesson today. We are in chapter 6 in the responsibility unit. And if you remember, we left off on page 104, page 104, and we covered the procedure from last class. And just to go back there really quick, and lesson plan 6, page D, that second part here, I guess we just read the whole thing. It says, have students turn to page 103 in their handbooks to the section Crimes in the Millions and analyze the chart. Discuss and answer the critical thinking questions found on page 104, that's what we covered the very last part of class previously were those critical thinking questions. Let's see here. Allow time for students to write the answers in the spaces provided in their handbooks. Emphasize that a lack of moral responsibility coupled with a lack of self-control are the causes of the crimes that negatively affect society. I'll briefly go over the information on pages 105 through 107, explaining society's answer to crime in the prison systems is the prison system, and tell students the different types of prisons, which we'll get into a little bit as we move forward. Very first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to go back to page 104, and we're going to look at this underneath the critical thinking part, because we covered that in the last class, like I said there. And then there's five boxes under there that kind of go with it and back up some of the things that were given in the critical thinking, but these are kind of statistics at that time for the information that could be gathered in 2001, which is usually information prior to that, that relate to the things that were covered in this critical thinking. In the first box there, it says an estimated $16.4 billion is stolen in property. And in stolen property was reported for the year 2000. And it's a great idea to go back and look up some of the more current estimates. Now, in some of these things, you'll actually find that the numbers, it seems like they stagnate. And a lot of it sometimes has to do with reporting. But, when I went back and looked up the current number on this, I think as of 2018 at least, it was somewhere around the same, 16. It was almost like identical to what's written right here. Almost makes me wonder if somebody did you get that report done for the, crime statistics? Oh, I better just copy and paste. It almost looks like they did that exactly, because I find it hard to believe that number would be exactly the same from the year 2000. But nonetheless, that's what you can find online. But a lot of these other things you can easily go The United States government, different federal departments and so forth, they like to take these numbers and try to give you a little bit of transparency of how your tax dollars are being spent and why it's necessary for your tax dollars to be spent this way. And so they want to show you all these different crimes that are taking place throughout your communities and the nation as a whole. All right, let's see here. So that was $16.4 billion in stolen property reported in 2000. And again, remember, that's reported. A lot of people that go through these things, they deal with theft. They kind of take it on the chin, so to speak. I just live in this neighborhood. It is what it is. The police aren't going to do anything about it. I'll never see those things ever again. So why even go through the effort of reporting it, right? Just kind of a waste of time. Let's see. It says there is much more crime than is reported to the police. Okay, goes right with that one. And the real crime figures might be 2 to 3 times higher than what is reported. Now that goes beyond just what we covered in the previous box of stolen property. That encompasses every crime. Remember, we talked about violence and assaults, sexual assaults, crimes against children and the elderly. A lot of times the victims, they really can't even speak for themselves, right? And so a lot of times those things go well underreported. So these numbers are very askew to some degree, and they do give a little, wiggle room for the numbers being, higher or lower. But for the most part, when these things take place, why would I, not to be pessimistic, about society, but the fact is when you have a society that does not, and of course this is not a generalization about everybody in society, but this is what you see across the board because of the influences, the things that are or are not taught, value systems that have kindly gone, to the back burner, so to speak, things that used to be upheld within communities, within schools, the morals that were taught and so forth. These things have kind of become null and void anymore. Just let people go and do what they want. Don't tell people they can't be this or let them be free. They want to identify as a rabbit or whatever, then that's fine. Just let them be. They operate by a different set of rules. But when you have a society that lacks morality, you can guarantee that there's going to be a high rate of crimes that occur because, as we covered previously, these things are a result of a lack of moral responsibility and a lack of self-control, right? People aren't responsible. They don't take accountability for themselves when it comes to, when you say moral responsibility, that's that person's responsibility, the responsibility that they take in following the rules. Remember, morals are rules. So when they don't take account for themselves or they don't govern themselves, remember, when you don't practice self-control yourself, then someone else has to control you. That's what we see in a lot of, we're going to get into some of society's responses to crimes, when people are incarcerated because of, in many cases, they haven't practiced self-control and certain laws have been broken. So that is how society chooses to deal with those things. Okay, so we have here, and just as a note, and dealing with these crimes here, and we're going to talk a little bit about it over here on page 105, but I think it was back in 1990, the number of federal prisons, let's see here, I guess it would be prisons in total, federal and state prisons, it was around 1,277. Now we'll see over here on 105, it was 1,430 state and 93 federal. I think it's still pretty close to the same, 93, 98 federal prisons in the United States currently. And then in 2005, it was around 1,821. And when you add everything up, the federal, the state, the local, the Indian jails, I think also they include detention centers, juvenile halls, and everything, as of 2024, of those facilities that are meant to house, detain, or incarcerate people, there are over 6,183 of those facilities in the United States at this time as of 2024. So numbers are rising. It's not causing the crime to go down. It's not causing immorality to go down. It's not causing disrespect to go down or self-control to increase, right? So repeating these same patterns of behaviors, as we have a great history of, even if we just localize it here to just United States, it hasn't made the changes that we desire to see. People who have their minds, they haven't been educated, they haven't been taught, they don't value themselves, they don't value their community, they don't value others, they don't value the property or possessions of others. They know that there are laws that are out there. They know that if they get caught, they can go to jail, they can go to prison. When they want to do it, they do it, right? The hope is that they don't get caught. The hope is that they get better at what they get. It's an oxymoronic word I hear sometimes is, he was the best car thief out there, the best criminal, a cat burglar, right? I don't think they use cat burglars anymore. I'm not sure if there's a new name for it. They probably have people identifying as cats, but they look at these immoral professions and they put these attributes of positivity with it. Well, that's not really the case. It seems like people will put a lot of effort. Of course, this is due to a lack of training, right? They'll put a lot of effort to become highly skilled, in thievery, in crime. And you have certain criminal organizations that they have whole teams and departments. Like nowadays, even with cars, car manufacturers have had to go through extremes to improve and increase security to keep their vehicles from being stolen. And of course, they want the customers to know that, hey, if you buy this car, you can be assured, that it's going to be safe. It's not going to be stolen. Someone's not going to just walk up and, jimmy the lock and stick a screwdriver in and start your vehicle and take off, because they want to have repeat business. They want people to talk about it. But as much as the technology increases there's always somebody in the criminal world that has the technology to counteract that. The same thing with a lot of these keys. They have these the keys that have little chips in them that the car's computer has to recognize in order for you to start. So you can't just go and hotwire a car and get it going, right? Well, criminals have found ways to get copies of those. They get a job at a dealership and they'll get copies of keys. And I remember there was a big heist where they stole it was like 5 or 6 of those Hellcats off of a dealership lot. There was one where a guy brought a Camaro to trade it in for another vehicle, but the dealership didn't realize that he actually turned in copy of the key fobs. A lot of these keyless, there's not even a key anymore. It's just a fob. He turned in a generic copy of that fob, and later on that night when the dealership closed, they came back with the original and they took the car, So there's always going to be people who are finding ways to go around the guards, the alarms, the systems that are there. Why? Because they don't value the rules. Now you think about it, when we get to the point where we're in a society where everyone values the rules, there won't be any need for alarms. There won't be any need for security bars. There won't be any need for fancy locks and home, video systems and all these things, because people will be honest. They'll respect the rights and the property of others. I think most of us, when we grew up, we can remember, people that had cars, they had secret kill switches that were underneath the dash and under the seat or behind the rearview mirror, that you had to press that before you could start the car. It was a whole process. When you got in the car, you had to take your club off, first of all, right? You remember the club that went on some of you probably don't. Oh, you guys should remember the club, I don't see nobody that's 12 or 13. Well, it might be a few. But yeah, it was a big club thing. You put on your bar, you put on your steering wheel, and that prevented you from, turning the steering wheel. People had wheel locks and all types of things that they put on their vehicles, all in an attempt to keep people from taking their property, right? And we're going to get into this. We're going to see a little bit about how that affects the way people live, how crime affects the way people live, how they go about conducting their life, how they take into consideration the things that they buy, not only for their own pleasure, but how, when they buy it, how are they going to keep it safe? Gone are the days where you can just buy a lawnmower and then just stick it out in your backyard because it'll be walking away by the next morning in some neighborhoods, some areas. All right, and then the third point there, it says sexual abuse is the major form of violence against children. Now, we won't get into it tonight, but you can go back to chapter 2 of the character unit, and really that whole chapter covers a lot of great information, pertinent information, especially from a teacher's standpoint and understanding the behaviors of some of your students. But it talks about the effects of character within the family and how when there is dysfunctionality in the home in the form of physical, verbal, or sexual abuse, how that can actually impact the child and the character and the choices, the behavior, the future behaviors of that child. And there's a couple of examples there with Ricky and Jonte, I think. All right. And then it says here, shoplifting. Shoplifting is a big ticket item for young people. That's why store clerks and managers watch them, that is, they watch young people so closely. I have, some of you probably remember seeing some of these signs. They have slide 5 and slide 6 there, that a lot of store owners actually had posted. I think not too far from here, one of our gas stations, they have it actually posted outside of their convenience store because of the proximity to the school, especially when they're really close to schools. I do have a copy of it here. I can throw that up there. But you'll see this sometimes, you know, on the outside of doors, no students allowed in store, no more than 3 students at a time, and then no backpacks, right? Because people will go into the store and then they'll start slipping things into their backpacks, right? And then what do? Either if they're not eating them themselves, they'll be taking it to school and they'll start selling it, right? Well, convenience store owners, they got tired of losing, you know, value on those types of things. And so they started a rule where they couldn't do that. And here was a nice little sign there, you know. They say there's signs everywhere to warn you from stealing. It says, hey, you get a free ride in a police car if you shoplift. Current compliments of your police department, right? So these are some of the things that a lot of stores will go through the effort of putting in their windows or outside their stores, like you saw that one was out like at a parking post there, to discourage, right? To discourage. Now, it doesn't prevent, right? Because the act of prevention starts, the process of prevention starts within the person's mind. You know, going into a store, which is a privilege, it's not your right, right? The store has the right to refuse service, okay? They say that, like I said, mentioned in the previous class, some stores have rules in order for you to enter the store. You have to have shirt, you have to have shoes, right, in order to have service. Even certain restaurants you go through, too, they have specific dress codes that you have to go, you know, men have to wear like a shirt and a tie and so forth, you know, when they go to the restaurant. And they have the right to refuse that service. But the problem with this is when people don't follow these rules, it impacts someone. Theft always impacts someone. Primarily, it's going to be the store owner, right? Because he's got to take the loss and he's got to make that up somewhere. He can't take it out of his employees' pay, right? He can't not pay the vendor who he got those things from because someone stole from him. So this money has to come out of someplace else. And typically, what do the store owners do? As a result, they got to raise the prices to cover theft. And this is all across the board, not just for convenience stores, but big box stores as well. They automatically figure in a certain percentage in their pricing to cover theft. And oddly enough, some of these really, really big stores, like some of the big stores in the United States, the majority of the thefts are not coming. The greatest majority of the theft comes from internal and not external. In other words, it's the employees that are stealing. Because people have the mindset, well, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. They won't miss this, you know, 84, 85-inch big screen television. You know, what do they care? Well, it's still their belongings. It's their property. These stores, Walmarts, Targets, Home Depots, Lowe's, whatever stores there are out there, everything that's in that store, you have the right to buy it. but it belongs to the store, that corporation, until you exchange something for it. Typically currency, right? Money. All right. So let's see here. Crimes against women, children, and the elderly are grossly, now this is what we talked about a little bit before, grossly underreported because they are often abused, sadly, by someone they know. And it was interesting because I heard a couple of podcasts, and they were talking about when a crime takes place, particularly it could be a sexual assault, it could be a violent crime, or it could be someone taking the life of another. The first place they always look are the relatives, because they say usually people are violated or abused, or they end the lives of another by somebody that they know. That whole familiarity thing. All right, let's look over at page 105. So we talked a little bit about that, and if you remember what William covered in his class when he left off about the counselor being beaten and set on fire by the teenage girls and the arrest that took place, and then we covered some of the questions in regards to the effects of those crimes, and then we covered a little bit about the crimes in the millions. Now, these are just things that we looked at in the United States during the year of 1997, and then a little bit of the critical thinking as well that we just got finished, and the statistics on page 104. So now we're going to look at what society's response is to crime. Now, just real quick, in your book, and you could find it in other books, but since we already have it in here, we'll go back to page 100 in your responsibility book. And at the very top there, you'll see the character of crime. One way to determine if individuals in a society are morally responsible for each other is to examine the rate of crime in that society. And so the reason I'm going back here is because we just kind of refresh our students' minds on what crime is, because we're talking about how society responds to it. Well, crime, again, is defined as a grave or serious offense, especially against morality, right? Against morality, against the rules that are set and established in order to ensure the safety and the longevity of life and so forth. Crimes such as burglary, rape, and murder and assault, to be physically aggressive, such as are examples of ways people are morally irresponsible to each other. Right? They're also morally irresponsible to themselves, but when these behaviors, extend beyond their own person, this is when these things take place and they start negatively impacting other people. And then you look at the very bottom there. It says when people, the last paragraph there, when people know that there is a thief in their neighborhood, they become fearful that their belongings will be stolen or their house burglarized. They make sure their doors are locked and close all windows at night. Some people buy dogs to scare off would-be thieves, and others spend thousands of dollars for security systems to protect their homes. Crime changes the quality of people's life. Think about living in an environment where you're always fearful of either something of yours being vandalized, something of yours being stolen, or someone just breaking into your house to do harm to you. And you would think about the higher degree of stress that a person would have to deal with on a daily basis, right? They're looking out of the window before they go outside to make sure that there's nobody hiding in the bushes or something to jump out and try to rob them. Or the same thing before they get out of their car when they get home, right? This is not a joyful way to live. But sadly, a lot of people do. And of course, like we see here at the very bottom, it changes the quality of people's lives. You can't have a quality, peaceful life when you're worried about your own personal safety, okay? Now, also for your note there, page 156, in the self-control unit, which you can write down, and when you get the opportunity, you can go back and tie these together. because this talks about how a lack of self-control affects our society. And this is, what was I going to read there? Last paragraph. Yeah, well, second to last paragraph. It says, crimes like the ones mentioned above, which are pretty much the same things we covered in this responsibility unit, create additional problems affecting the quality of life. For instance, freedom, safety, and security become limited in areas where there is a high rate of crime. People become fearful for their lives and their belongings. They become afraid to allow their children to play outdoors, to walk around their neighborhood, to leave their cars unlocked, and to sleep with their windows open. You can be certain that people who have moral character, value life, and respect the possessions of others are not the ones who are committing these crimes, right? Like they say, locks keep honest people honest, right? They're not going to go into a locked door. In fact, whenever there is a closed door, if they don't have permission or, need to be there, they're going to find permission from the proper person, or if they get there, they're at least going to knock on it, right? Somebody who has the mindset of not caring about the rules, do you think criminals knock on the door before they break into your house? They might check and see if the door is unlocked, hoping that today's their lucky day and they can just walk right into the house, hope that someone just forgot to close the garage or to, lock the back door or whatever, so it'll make their getaway a lot easier. But without those who uphold the law and practice self-control, even simple activities that you would take for granted, like going to school or to the mall, would become dangerous and life-threatening. In most areas of the world, the majority of people practice some degree of self-control. They treat others with respect. There are also some people in all areas of the world who lack self-control and get carried away by their emotions, causing harm to innocent men, women, and children. And you see that there, a lot of the things that a lot of people are dealing with today that has been in the news quite a bit, in addition to a lack of self-control, is just mental illness. People are dealing with a lot of mental issues that, cause them to make irrational decisions that they would, in otherwise, under healthy circumstances, not make certain choices, right? In a lot of cases, they know what they're doing is wrong, but they don't have a reason for not doing it, right? There's no self-control there. So let's look on page 105 here, because we're talking about society's response to crime. Historically, society's response to criminals has been to incarcerate those who break the law in order to protect law-abiding citizens and reduce the number of crimes. And of course, we're going to see here, I have a video to play here, not right now, but in a little bit, how this actually is pretty counterproductive. Incarcerating people, building more prisons, it doesn't reduce the number of crimes. If it did, the United States would be the safest country in all the world. It would be, because we've got a terrible high amount of prisons in the United States. Jails, prisons, incarcerations, detention centers, whatever you want to call them. We have a lot of them. I almost say we have as many, well, I won't, never mind. Well, once a person is found guilty of a crime, he or she can be placed in either jail or prison based on the seriousness of the crime and the duration of the sentence. Of course, a better response, if you look back to, and this is in every book, every one of these books here, a better response to this than sticking them in jail or prison, it's found right there in the introduction of all the peaceful solution manuals on page 15. And just that first paragraph there. It says, the Peaceful Solution Character Education Incorporated is pleased to introduce you to the most unique, effective, and practical character education program available today. You are holding a teaching tool that is guaranteed to minimize crime and violence, social disunity, and moral degradation in the classroom, home, and community. Now, this would much preferably be used in place of sticking someone behind bars, okay? Because in that way, through education, and of course, role modeling and giving them the opportunity to put these things into practice, we can truly reduce the number of crimes because you're changing the mind and the heart of the person. Prisons and jails are different. Jails are mainly used for short-term sentences, usually for 1 year or less. They are also used to house people in protective custody and juveniles who are waiting to be transferred to a detention center. Prisons, on the other hand, are for long-term offenders. They offer educational and vocational training, as well as counseling in an effort to help the inmates change their lives. As of 1998, the United States, in the United States, there were 93 federal prisons and 1,400 or 1,430 state prisons. Because children also commit criminal acts, society has to make special arrangements for offenders under the age of 18. And as we saw with the article on the 6 or 8 girls, you know, this is becoming even more commonplace in society. And let me think. I think we saw that in our previous article there, our previous video there, about how the number of crimes are increasing. I read a few statistics, you know, of the crimes that are increasing amongst the youth right now. Children cannot be placed in adults' prison even though they have committed the same crimes because they would be at greater risk for all forms of abuse. They're often placed in juvenile correctional institutions. A more common name used to be, I think, kiddie jail. Now, the main purpose of prisons or jails is to, when they give 3 points, there are 3 points that are given here at the bottom of page 105, protect society. Now, of course, this is done in a way to remove the person who is the offender or offending the rules or breaking the rules. Remember the crime. Remember what a crime is. It's an offense, a grave offense that we covered here, a grave or serious offense, especially against morality. Okay, so when you remove the offender, now this is how society is looking at it. You know, when you remove the offender from society, now you don't have to worry about that individual. Problem is that wasn't the only individual, right? Like one of the teachers said, you know, if you were to go strictly based on the rules that our United States government has made, every single one of us is a criminal in some way. Every single one of us. I guarantee you there's some rule in one of those tens of thousands of books that we've broken, right? Now, of course, that's not intentional. But what we're talking about here are things in regards to safety of others. So the other purpose of a prison is to prevent crime. Well, again, putting one person in prison might prevent that person from committing that crime in society because they are removed from society, but it doesn't prevent that person from creating or engaging in that crime in prison, because crime still takes place in prison. There's murders, there's rapes, there's abuse, there's drugs, you know, there's alcohol abuse, prescription abuse, there's you know, money, you know, extortion, all types of those same things take place inside or behind the prison walls that take place on the outside as well. And then it says here, lastly, a part of what it's meant to do. I just want to make sure that, a part of what the purpose of prisons or jail are for is to rehabilitate. Well, are they really serving that purpose, right? Are they helping the people? Are they helping society? Now, granted, there are some people who, you know, seems like all sense of self-control, and they truly are a danger to themselves, physical danger to themselves and other people. and they do kind of need a timeout from society, right? They kind of need to be separated from everybody else because, you know, they really could physically harm someone else. They could take another person's life, you know, but then they need to be given the things, whether it's training or, you know, other things for their mind or whatever imbalances there might be, you know, to help them so that they can start thinking better, okay? So there are times when you have to kind of remove a person from society, kind of like when we were children, you got to time out. You start throwing a tantrum and, you know, jumping on the counters and knocking dishes off the, you know, off the walls and things like that. Well, you become dangerous, right? You can hurt yourself or hurt someone else and damage property as well. Well, you've got to remove that person from that situation to give them an opportunity to calm down. So how well is this system working? If we can go ahead and play my video, it'll give us a little bit of insight into what others are seeing about this according to the numbers.
On any given day in the United States, around 2 million people are being held in federal, state, local, juvenile, immigration, and other detention centers. But when you look at who comes under correctional control over a whole year, that number is closer to 10 million people, which is roughly the populations of New York City and Chicago combined. Now let's break that down. Of that nearly 10 million, more than 5.5 million people end up behind bars. 600,000 of those are sent to prison, and about 4.9 million of those are put in jail. Then there's the folks on probation and parole, which comes out to roughly 4 million people under supervised release. So how did we get here? Mass incarceration started in the 1970s with Richard Nixon's thinly veiled racist agenda known as the War on Drugs. Then Ronald Reagan took things a step further with his tough-on-crime policies. When he started his first term in 1981, the total prison population was a little more than 329,000 people. When he was heading out the door in 1989, it had nearly doubled to more than 627,000. Bill Clinton added fuel to the fire with his 1994 crime bill, which led to higher rates of incarceration and longer prison sentences. Marginalized communities felt the brunt of tough-on-crime policies then, and are still feeling it today. People of color make up a disproportionate amount of those incarcerated in comparison to the general population. For instance, in 2017, Black people made up around 12% of U.S. residents, but accounted for about 33% of the U.S. prison population. Comparatively, white people made up 64% of the population, but only 30% of those in prison. Also overrepresented behind bars are survivors of sexual violence. 86% of women in jail are survivors of sexual assault, and 77% report a history of intimate partner violence. Another perhaps overlooked issue is the number of older adults who are incarcerated. Despite older Americans being one of the least likely groups to recidivate, almost half of people serving life without parole are 50 or older. On the flip side are young people. On a given day, more than 48,000 youths are under correctional control outside their homes. The majority of these young people are in juvenile detention facilities, but around 4,500 youths were held in adult prisons and jails in 2019, putting them at a higher risk for sexual abuse. While the current structure upends the lives within its walls, the criminal legal system affects people on the outside too. Nearly half of all adults living in the US have had an immediate family member incarcerated for at least one night. That's approximately 113 million people. 1 in 4 has had a sibling incarcerated, 1 in 5 has had a parent incarcerated, and 1 in 34 people has had an immediate family member spend 10 or more years in prison. Clearly, mass incarceration is far-reaching in its impact, but is locking up millions of people keeping the country safe? The simple answer is no. There's ample evidence that higher rates of incarceration don't lead to lower rates of crime. This includes violent crime, which is often called upon as a justification for locking people up. Instead, reduction in crime has been explained by factors such as increased employment, higher wages, and improved graduation rates. In other words, investments in people, not jails and prisons, leads to a decrease in crime. Despite this evidence, the United States spends roughly $81 billion each year on mass incarceration, while programs investing in housing, healthcare, education, addiction treatment, mental health, and other initiatives proven to make people safer are vastly underfunded. The data is clear. Mass incarceration doesn't keep people safe, but public safety models that actually invest in the public do.
So you see there, according to the numbers and the statistics, the increase in incarcerating folks have not reduced crime. And of course, she made a great point, investments in people, right? Not in prisons, but investments in people. And of course, that's what's being offered with the peaceful solution, because this is an investment. Remember what we covered about teaching a person how to fish. You give them a fish, you feed them for a day, You teach them to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. Well, when you teach a person to understand the importance of education, to value education, to understand the importance of rules, to value the rules, and to put those rules into practice and let them be the determining factor for the decisions that they make on a daily basis, they become a beneficial, productive member of society, right? They start to take control of their thoughts and their feelings and their actions. And they stop and think about, well, what is the best possible outcome to resolve this situation? Maybe it's a conflict. Maybe it's a difficulty that they might be encountering. Maybe somebody said or did something that they really didn't like, right? What will be the way that I can bring about a peaceful solution in this manner, okay? And that, of course, will start to turn, society around as a whole, because people will start to be kind of like automatic in their thinking, right? They will be the ones practicing self-control instead of having to have someone control them. Well, let's look over to page 106. Let me just double check here. Yeah, page 106. And we see here everything you ever wanted to know about prisons. If you did, this is here where you can find some information here. A brief summary anyway. But we're afraid to ask. All right, there are 3 different classes of prisons. You have minimum, medium, and maximum security. And so you have minimum security prisons. Some of the points here can be mistaken for college campuses based on how they look, the kind of the freedom of the inmates that are there, how things are set up. A lot of them, they're not behind bars. They're kind of in like dorm rooms, so to speak, quads and things like that. It's a very loose, very relaxed atmosphere. Inmates are first-time offenders convicted of non-violent crimes. These are the type of people that you'll find in a minimum security. Inmates are given fair amount of trust that they will obey the rules. And inmates are given some freedom to move about the property. Now, sometimes people who have, served a certain term in their sentence, who might have been in a higher security prison, might be able to be removed down to a lower security prison, like from a maximum to a medium or a medium to a minimum. Sometimes it goes the opposite too. If a person becomes really violent, they're moved up as well. And then you have medium security prisons, and it says it's frequently house inmates convicted of crimes that are both violent and nonviolent. Inmates often share the same living areas, and security guards monitor the movement of the prisoners. Freedom is severely limited. And then you have maximum security prisons, and that is they house the most violent criminals. Inmates are isolated from one another in single cells, and inmates are confined to their cells for 23 hours a day, coming out for 1 hour only to exercise and shower. And I don't know how much different that is from a supermax, because they also have those supermax prisons, or prison. I don't think they have that many more. I think Alcatraz was one of them. It was supposed to be a supermax prison. Pelican Bay? Okay. Right now, I think the only one is the ADX supermax prison here. This is they call them a supermax security or supermax administrative maximum, or ADX prison, is a controlled unit prison or a unit within prisons which represents the most secure level of custody in the prison system of certain countries. I guess that's when the guys, who have to have the mask on their face and they walked with sticks and everything, and they're in the jackets because they're so violent, that they don't want to take any risk. Some of these guys, because of their life, remember again, it's easy to look at people who are incarcerated and think, that's a bad man or that's a bad woman. They deserve to be locked up and have the key thrown away. But really, do they? Based on everything we've learned in the peaceful solution, that their behavior right here, right now, is a result of something that took place way, way, way back in their life, possibly even before they were born. Those seeds were planted in their genes and in their mind, and they came out under certain circumstances. Now, does it mean that they're hopeless? No, it doesn't mean that they're hopeless. Anybody can change if they're given the opportunity. Problem is that you think about a person who is in that situation, what opportunity do they have, right, to improve themselves? Because really they're just put away in a hole and just left there for 23 hours a day, all right? It says the objective of this is to provide, speaking of the supermax prisons, long-term segregated housing for inmates classified as the highest security risk in the prison system and those who pose an extremely serious threat to both national and global security. And in the United States, there is only one of the America's strictest supermax prisons remaining in the U.S. federal prison system, and that's the ADX Florence in Florence, Colorado. And it houses numerous inmates that have a history of violent behavior in other prisons, with the goal of moving them from solitary confinement up to 23 hours a day to less restrictive prison within 3 years. So they are trying to get them from, being in this supermax situation to, a better, less restrictive prison there. However, it is best known for housing several inmates who have been deemed either too dangerous, too high profile, or too great to national security risk for even a maximum security prison. They include several prisoners convicted of domestic and international terrorism, such as Timothy McVeigh, Terry Nichols, who perpetrated the Oklahoma City bombing, Richard Reed, and Umar, that's a name I don't know how to pronounce, who separately attempted to detonate explosives on a commercial airplane flight. And then another person here who was involved in the Boston Marathon bombing, and other notable inmates that were convicted of espionage and so forth, including Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the head of the Mexican Sinaloa cartel and the world's most powerful drug lord, convicted in 2019. So those are some of the superstars in the supermax there that they house. So this is a little bit of an idea that you can break it down to your students. Now, if you get the opportunity, you can pull up some pictures off of the internet to kind of give your students an idea of different prison facilities from the outside, but also from the inside. I know we have a lot of students who have come out of the prison facility. Myself, Chris, and David, William, we've all been to different facilities, and it is a different environment. I mean, it is a completely different environment from the time you walk through, the safety checks, and then you have to walk through several series of gates that one has to be closed and secured before the next one's opened, and the warning signs on the fencing telling you not to touch it. It's electrified, with 7,000 volts going through it, the razor wire at the top. You're not getting the sense of home sweet home, when you go there. And to think that, a lot of these people, this is what they see and encounter day after day, right? It has an effect on the mind. A lot of these guys, you think about being locked up for 23 hours a day. Now we have the ability, the privilege of just being able to go outside, look up, take a breath of fresh air, and just, see the sunlight, even see in the clouds, even have rain fall and hit you on your face, right? A lot of people don't have these things. So this is why we need teachers. This is why we need teachers of the peaceful solution, because for a lot of society, they see people who they place in these facilities as hopeless. I think William used the word, he was told once he was incorrigible, right? In other words, there's nothing we can do to help you. You're never going to change. But that's not true. Everybody has the ability to change. They just have to be given the education, the opportunity, and shown how to put these things into practice. All right, so let's look over here to page 107 here. Yeah, okay, so got a little time. Page 107 here, it says, prison life in general is violent and unpredictable. Prisoners routinely abuse one another physically, verbally, emotionally, and sexually. In the United States, correction officials reported that there were over 30,000 inmate assaults on other inmates. Now, of course, now remember, these are statistics from over, 20, 24, 25 years ago. And then also something else to consider, I didn't mention it, but as of 2019, the U.S. prison systems are operating at a 12%. They're operating at 12% above capacity right now. 12% above capacity on average of the U.S. prison systems. Now, I've seen some other prisons outside of the U.S. prisons where, the U.S. prisons are not great, but I would say that they're probably a little bit more humane than most other prisons outside the United States, where they've got these men in some of the prisons in South America. There's a lot of documentaries on these things online that you can find and kind of educate yourself, when you teach these lessons. But these men are literally packed in there like sardines in these prisons. They can barely, only thing they can do in some of these facilities is barely just lay down. And they've literally got somebody right here, somebody's feet right here, and their feet is against someone's head. Now imagine trying to live that way. Imagine trying to live somewhat comfortably, right? I know prisons aren't made to be a 5-star resort hotel, but just to have a little bit of elbow room to, breathe a little bit, and it's hot and they're sweating, everybody's not clean. Everybody doesn't have the same hygiene habits and so forth. And this is why you have an increase. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the sicknesses, the rates of sicknesses in prison as well. So you've got over 30,000 here who are assaulted. Now, that's just assaulted. That could be in many different ways. Now, there is a high rate of crime even within prisons. Inmates' belongings are routinely stolen. Some are forced to give up their belongings, such as soap, toilet paper, and food, which is also used in some cases as, commodities and currency and so forth, in exchange for things, other things, bartering. In addition, sexually transmitted diseases, including HIV, are prevalent in prison. Now, this is according to the CDC here. In fact, let's see here. I'll just throw that up there because I didn't make a slide for it. It says, according to the CDC, correctional health is important to us because a higher proportion of people in correctional settings have or are at risk for HIV, viral hepatitis, TB, which is tuberculosis, or STIs, sexually transmitted infections, because of social and economic factors, mental and substance use disorders, a history of experiences with homelessness, sex work, or injection drug use. Compared with the general population now, this is specifically speaking about prisons, prevalence of HIV, viral hepatitis, TB, and STIs is higher among people who are incarcerated. For HIV, it's 3 times higher in state and federal prisons. Hepatitis C, 10 times higher in jails and prisons. Tuberculosis, 6 times higher in jails and federal prisons. And for STIs, higher rates of chlamydia and gonorrhea among people aged less than 35 years in juvenile and adult detention facilities. So the rates in that regard are pretty high when you look at it compared to the general population. All right. So now it says here, due to overcrowding, remember what we just talked about, 12% above capacity right now in the United States, which exists in most U.S. prisons, prisons are constantly being built to accommodate the ever-increasing number of people convicted of crimes. The overcrowded prisons and jails add to the violence and abuse that already exists. Part of the problem with that is because you're taking people who are convicted of violent crimes. You haven't done anything to educate them. You haven't done anything to change their mind. You haven't done anything to improve the way they think, the quality of their thinking, and as a result, the regulation of their behavior and the control of their regulation, of their emotions and the control of their behavior, and you stick them in an environment with other people who have the same issue, You're not going to have people singing around a campfire singing Kumbaya, right? You're multiplying, you're magnifying, you're concentrating the problem, and it's becoming bigger and bigger because everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have a chip on their shoulder when they get to a place like that, because irregardless of the crime that they commit, irregardless of whether they acknowledge that they're guilty or not, nobody wants to be in prison. Nobody, right? It's like when you're told you have to go to your room because you didn't do something, or you did do something that you were not supposed to, right? And you get in there and you start throwing stuff, and you're kicking this, and you knock over things, and you rip the sheets off your bed because you're upset. Well, that's when a person's 12 years old. Take a man that's in his mid-20s, mid-30s, mid-40s, and put him in an environment like that where he's still not practicing self-control, and he hits or does or offends somebody else who has that same mindset there. Well, now you got a big conflict. Now you got to fight, right? So it doesn't fix the problem there. Let's see here. I lost my spot here. The overcrowded prisons and jails add to the violence and abuse that already exists. And at the very bottom or last paragraph there, it says, in an effort to rehabilitate inmates, prisons offer educational and vocational programs to help them. A vocational program teaches skills related to a specific job or trade. And although these programs are available, and understand it's not across the board every single place, some places do have better programs there, but even though the ones that do have them and they are available to the prisoners or the inmates, only 20 to 25% of prisoners are even motivated to participate in these things, right? And I want to leave you with something here this evening here, because you see at the very top of that sentence, that paragraph, that first sentence, it says, in an effort to rehabilitate. And Chris, and I think William and maybe David has mentioned this before in regards to this this term of rehabilitation, because it has a beneficial, or I don't want to say negative meaning, but you have to be careful in how you use it, because if we look here at the definition, it says to return someone to a healthy, all right, which is a great thing. Return someone to a healthy state or usual condition or way of living. Now, when you take into consideration how, Chris was bringing this out before, you don't want to bring someone back to the usual way, because what brought them there is how they were living to begin with. So you don't want to return them back to how they were living. Otherwise, you get what's called recidivism, right? Like the one lady said there. Or to return something to, as it's mentioned here, a good condition. Now, the etymology there of that word rehabilitate is from re, or again, and habitare, make fit. So it's the action of restoring anything to a previous condition. Now, this is great in regards to restoring someone to a previous condition if at one point they were known as the person who was an honor roll student, who was very kind and respectful and who followed the rules. Yes, we want to get them back to being in that condition. But if it was the condition that they were in right before they were incarcerated, no, we don't want to get them back to there, right? So we want to, in explaining these things to your students, you kind of want to, because words are important, you want to point these things out. When we talk about that word there, healthy or usual, the definition of the word usual, and no matter how many times I look at that word, it always looks like it's not spelled right, but but it is. It just looks, you ever look at words, sometimes you spell them and you're like, that does not look right. T-H-E, T-H-E, Tehi. Oh, it's the. Found in ordinary practice or the ordinary course of events. Now, what is ordinary? That could vary depending on the lifestyle, the choices, and the character of the person. Accordant with usage, custom, or habit, habitually or typically occurring or done, which you could have somebody who's a habitual liar, somebody who's a habitual thief. Customary, occurring or encountered or experienced or observed frequently or in accordance with regular practice or procedure, which something that a person does all the time, whether those habits are great or bad. Well, in this case, we're talking about some of the things we want to eliminate, these bad character traits, these bad habits, these bad practices or procedures. We don't want to return them back to those bad practices or procedures. What we actually want to do is we want to eliminate, drop the re there, and habilitate people. And there is a difference between rehabilitation, if we have time, which we don't, and habilitation. And just to leave you with this definition of this word habilitate, it means to make fit. As for functioning in society, to train, to clothe, or to equip. And real quick, one of the things they talk about when you habilitate a person, when you rehabilitate a person, you're renewing something that already existed. When you habilitate a person, you're giving them new skills, new knowledge, new information. Okay. And this is what we want to do. And this is why it's important that we learn these things so that we can become teachers, because when we teach these things to our students, it's going to be the very first time for many of them that they ever heard of any of these concepts. So in this way, we can habilitate them so that they can make better choices and avoid the risk-taking behaviors that we covered in the previous classes here, and pretty much all of them, that we see so prevalent in society today. So we do thank you for coming to class. We're going to have, just as a note, again, our next class will not be this coming Wednesday. It's actually going to be the following Sunday, which is going to be 5/19. So, you can tune in, but you won't be seeing us. It's going to be this coming Sunday, the next Sunday, 5/19 at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. We look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you for coming and have a wonderful evening.